Good evening, guys. Economics released today. Coincidentally, we are anyway doing the current affairs for agriculture part, right? So here is a quick summary of the trends that you have to pick up from the economic survey. We will be linking it to the geography part and also the policies that you will have to, take a note. Quickly, this will be a very short session because there are some slight changes in the orientation of this survey. So I'm trying to adapt according to that. To begin with, quick review of what our Indian Economic Survey says this year. Even though the first line of the survey says that even though we wanted to achieve something across the globe, due to the protectionism as a trend, what we wanted to achieve was not achieved. This is the hallmark of every major economy in 2025. Indian economy is no exception. As a consequence, we will be revamping our growth targets. Right, so this is the major takeaway. Protectionism is the major takeaway. Within that, if you are talking about the trend of agriculture, it is pretty much consistent with what was expected because no major intervention happened here. However, there's some interesting trends. We were preparing on the aspect of geography, right? So, because this survey talks about some specific crops and some specific trends, we will have to link it to geography also. Here, I will reiterate our logic on how we will approach our topics of economics in the agriculture part by linking it to geography. So this is a quick recap. If you take a look at the heading, agriculture, food management, raising productivity. So when you're talking about raising productivity, what is it a function of? Firstly, let's understand that. What do you mean by productivity here? Let's say for X amount of inputs, if you are having Y output, if you are more productive, you will have more than Y. So there should be, ideally, what we would desire, an exponential increase in the output that you will get for a given amount of input. So, between input and output, there must be something in the middle, the process. That process changes the productivity. Okay? If you understand agriculture as an economic activity, if it has to get efficient, it is a function of two things. How you improve input efficiency, and secondly, how you increase marketing activity for better price realization. This is the economics part. This is the combination of geography and science and tech part. Clear? Now, if you have to take a decision on what crop to grow, where to grow, how much yield you should get, how much money you should expect out of it, we were discussing about an algorithm that will work for you. I was talking about how you have to pass through 4 different layers to decide on what crop is the best possible output for a given situation. Firstly, you're talking about land. A quick recap of what we discussed in the previous class. If you are talking about the substructure, that is the rock layer, the geology part, that will lead to a specific soil. On the top of that soil, you are adding the layers of temperature as well as precipitation. That will decide one layer. Secondly, the soil texture, whether it will allow permeability, porosity, all these aspects, whether it will allow water drainage, that is the second layer. We have already discussed that. Third is, now we will be coming to the economic aspects of it. Here we are reducing all the first 2 steps into the step 1. Step 2 is checking whether it is economically viable. Will farmers really grow this crop at scale in this region? Is there any incentive? That will decide 2. Can it be stored easily? Do you need a factory to process it? Would you require a warehouse? If you can transport it easily? All these questions do matter. Here, at this point, I will slightly digress and take you into a concept called agri-value chain. Okay, something that you already know. Once you decide whether it is geographically viable or not, we will be moving to the agri-value chain concept. Input, processing, and output. Output here is the money that you get. Input here is all the land, water, that is irrigation, seeds, and all the other inputs required. Process is about harvesting, mechanization, marketing, everything else will come here. Okay? Now, if you want to go ahead with the economic viability part, you will have to consider the costs associated here. Ultimately, even after that is done, if there is no demand for this, none of the factors will matter. It is geographically possible to produce this crop, so I produced it, but no one is buying. Why will you do it? This is the common sense logic that you should adapt. Okay? That changes from region to region. So the first layer, most of the times, no farmer will, try to produce something in a area where the soil itself is not supporting you. I will treat agriculture parallelly to a computer. A computer requires both a hardware as well as a software. Hardware in this case is the geography aspect, the soil. Software is about the decisions that we take, the algorithms which we take to decide if it is viable or not. When both these factors combine together, you will get the desired output of a crop in a specific region. Third step, in the process, like you decided this is economically viable, you should also consider the risk. What if you have a drought? What if you have some kind of a wildfire? What are the risks associated? Is the government going to impose additional tax? Are we having duties? Any competitor, are they dumping in our country? If they are doing it, is the government going to protect us? This kind of a risk matrix should be considered by farmers. Next step is the policy. So, in this entire agri-value chain, you will have various problems. Sometimes the seeds are a problem. You have seen this case in a very famous situation of PepsiCo case, like Lay's. I'll give you a brief, story. What happened? The farmers in Gujarat, they were getting a contract from PepsiCo, the company that is producing Lay's chips. So they wanted a specific variety of potato and they had a contract. Now, the policy dilemma is the seed of that potato, should it be patented by the company or should it be given to the farmers? And this conflict, farmers' side won. But again, at the same time, it will also act as a disincentive for the companies in R&D. How do we solve this problem? So the problem is creating the appropriate incentive structure. It is not going to be solved by saying that I will give you more seeds. Right? So a specific policy statement should address the problem correctly. If the statements in the UPSC question in the preliminary stage are not making sense in this policy level, most probably you have to flag it and look at it with suspicion to eliminate it. Okay, this is the fourth layer. Geography layer, economics, risk management, and finally policy. These two are of economics, this is of geography, this is of governance. A combination of all these factors will help you decide what is the right answer. Even in those situations when you don't know the crop, even in those situations when you don't know the actual trend. But if economic survey is coming up with certain trends, you will have to know about them. Clear? Now, so to even simplify it further, I'm giving you some traps that you can remember so that whenever you see such options, you will be much more careful. Let's say I'll put a crop which does not like waterlogging condition. Can you tell me a crop that does not like waterlogging condition? Jute doesn't like waterlogging. It is actually, it needs waterlogging. Say tea for example. Any crop that you would eventually find on slopes would hate waterlogging conditions. The soil should be conducive for the water to flow without actually eroding the top layer. So permeability, porosity, both of them will matter for these kind of crops. So let's say if I say that tea is grown on plain regions, if I take a crop like tea and put it in Ganga plains, where waterlogging conditions is the norm, you have to see that identity mismatch and remove that statement. This is the first thing that you need to know. Geography is the first savior. Second is, when the statement is made in such a way that, let's say, a crop like sugarcane or rice, wheat, most of these crops are water guzzling crops. And if I put a word sustainability along with this in a water guzzling crop, most of the times it is false, because the logic defies it. This is how UPSC can confuse you. That is the second check. Now, let's say for example, from a pure market standpoint, it is viable to produce high value crops like, let's say, orchards, or let's say any fruits and vegetables. The problem with this kind of crops is that they don't have a long shelf life. Geographically, yes, it is possible. Economically, is it viable? Because it would require a cold storage infrastructure. In the absence of that cold storage infrastructure, they don't have any value after 3 or 4 days. So the initial investment itself to realize that economic potential is very high. So it is not obvious to assume that this region will actually be known for a huge market of a specific horticulture crop just because geography supports it. Geography is just the basic hardware layer. What about the software part? The economic decision engine that we require to translate that crop into wealth for farmers. That is absent. So that is something that you need to check. Finally, whenever you think that just because you are giving all the necessary inputs, it should necessarily translate into a crop, you are missing the point of the necessity of processing and every care that it requires. Just because government is giving everything away for free doesn't necessarily mean it will become a crop. If any such framing of the statement is there, I would want you to flag it and stop it there itself. Clear? A quick algorithm of how you have to approach geography questions within the domain of agriculture. What crop grows where? So, if you understand multiple layers in a framework, you will be completing all these topics in a single sitting. So, if I have to sum up, what are the things that you can learn? The first layer would be agroeconomic zones. Okay? I'm not asking you to by heart all the agroeconomic zones, but at least you need to have a fair idea of what soil would be present where, which will again be contingent on your understanding of Indian geological history. Indian geological history. Plate tectonic movements, etc., rifts, faults, everything, that will tell you the underlying parent rock. When that parent rock is subjected to weathering, you will know the soil. When that soil is clear, you will know what crop is possible provided this crop gets all the necessary inputs like water, seeds, etc. This is how I want you to prepare the first component of agroeconomic zones. When you move away from that, the second layer that you need to understand is cropping patterns. What do you mean by cropping patterns? Crops are grown for commercial activities. The main intention here is to generate revenue out of it. Okay. So, what crops grows in what soil? You need to have a mental framework. It is physically impossible for you to by heart all this information because there might be many opportunities for you to, forget the correct information. Because the minute you add one more layer of information, confusion increases. So let's narrow down our basic sources of information so that you know what areas to focus on. Okay? Let's go back to the basics. When agriculture first began in human history, what was the main intent? Was it to generate income? No. Food. Correct? So let's begin with that idea. Let's look at agriculture's purpose. And I will be focusing on some main areas. Agriculture's main purpose was, in the initial days, food security. Okay? What is the difference between food security and nutritional security? Food plus nutrition, or I would rather say food to nutrition. Here the focus was majorly on calorie requirement, carbs. Here it is both the macro as well as the micro aspects, micronutrient aspect. So when I'm talking about macros, what do we have? You have carbs, carbohydrates, short form is carbs, protein and fats. Okay? And the micronutrients will be about all the minerals and vitamins which are necessary for healthy lifestyle of a human being. In a large part of our independent history, we were focusing on this one aspect alone. We are not even focused on other parts. We are majorly focused on carbs only. Okay? So because of this reason, you need to know what are our carbohydrate resources and what are the policy implications for that. Let's try to understand that. What are the staple foods? Staple diet. Rice and wheat. Okay? If you have to categorize them agronomically under one specific category, you can call them as cereals. What is a cereal? Cereal is like a grass. Okay? Taxonomically speaking, it might come it will come under grasses. Okay? Coming back. What is the difference between a cereal and a grain? Grain is nothing but the, let's say for example, the outer layer as well as the inner part. Cereal refers to the entire crop. Okay. Majorly these cereals are the carbohydrate sources for Indian citizens, like Indian geography part. But has it been this traditionally? No. This is a result of our economic choice or policy choice rather, I would say. It is because of the Green Revolution. Okay? This became a reality because of technological intervention when human beings decided that we will alter our environment to create that surplus. Fine? Here, you will have to know some important facts that you will probably get in your exam. Let's start with rice. Okay. Where is rice grown? Rice is grown in areas where you will have alluvial soils. Where will you find alluvial soils? In the plain regions, delta regions, where you get soil which is nourished from river flow. From mountainous regions to this delta regions, you will get the replenished soil from time to time. So the quality of alluvial soil in the south versus in the north. Where will you find richer soils? Or I would rather say, where will you find the soils getting periodically replenished? North. Why? In the north, if you see, in the northern part of the country, you will see rivers flowing through. Underlying rock system is sedimentary in nature. It is a soft rock. When it is weathering and it is undergoing this mechanical friction, the finer quality of the particles will get deposited as alluvium. Compare that to the southern counterpart where you will have hard rocks. It is difficult to get the same quality. Clear? So this is the difference. Nevertheless, rice thrives in these regions. More in the north, less in the south. You of course have places where you will get immense rice production, but logically, geographically speaking, these areas are more suited. Northern part is more suited for this rice cultivation. Clear? Fine. Which are the states which produce lot of rice? Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, Punjab, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Telangana. This has been the trend. Now, in the last few years, you witnessed a reversal in that trend. Telangana is the largest producer of rice in the country. Clear? Here, there was one more controversy dated back to the pandemic era, 2020, when the so-called parboiled rice, okay, parboiled rice, which Telangana produces, is not procured under MSP because there is no demand. Okay. In this context, you can understand why it is not procured. Firstly, I'll not go into the details of that parboiled rice, etc. But you will have to understand that you know this process of polishing the rice, right? When you are polishing, the outer layer of any cereal majorly contains vitamin B, B complex as it is called. As you polish it away, the vitamins get washed away. Parboiled rice, even though it doesn't taste as good as the normal polished rice, does the opposite. The activity of parboiling increases the concentration of vitamin B. However, there is no good demand for parboiled rice within our country. It is majorly exported. And during pandemic, this export is stopped because there is no trade. Shipping activity was literally halted. And even if it was the case, other countries were nevertheless producing it themselves, the export markets. So you might get a statement saying that parboiled rice will reduce vitamin B or reduce the vitamin quantity in the grain. That is false. Please remember this. This is one point that I wanted to highlight. In general, if you polish it, it will vanish. Like it will reduce, not vanish completely, it will reduce. So if they give a blanket statement saying that rice processing will lead to loss of nutrition, it is false. It can go either way. If you are parboiling it, it will increase. If you are polishing it, it will reduce. Clear? That is one trend. So these are some of the myths that you might have heard. That's why I'm highlighting this point so that you don't make those mistakes. This is about rice. Now, when you come to the export part, agricultural exports. Agricultural exports, within that, basmati rice is one of the largest component. So there is a renewed demand that we have to give more and more GI tax to basmati rice. So I'm giving you a homework. Go to the Ministry of Commerce, check which rice, basmati rice, which kind of rice varieties have GI tax. For the marketing purpose, these important rice products will be very, very crucial for your prelims exam. Please go and check there once. Okay? Next up. We were talking about our staple food, rice and wheat. Where do you expect rice and wheat? Rice grows in the Kharif season and wheat grows in the Rabi season. The differentiator there is what element of geography? Temperature. Rice requires slightly higher temperature when compared to wheat. So the limiting factor there is temperature. Okay? Think on these lines too. Am I going too fast or is it okay? Clear, right? Now, another cereal that is in news, maize. Even in our newspaper analysis sessions, we were discussing how maize, which is a cereal crop, even though it is viable to grow this crop in various parts of the country where other cereals also grow, we don't do it as much. But the trend is changing now. What is maize? Corn. You know the corn, right? Same thing. The use of this crop is majorly twofold. One, majorly, traditionally, it was used as a feedstock in the poultry industry. Two, now it is being used as a source of ethanol. So, economic survey was highlighting how the diversification of the land for maize is increasing, and that land is taking away the acreage of pulses. Now you might be wondering, cereals and pulses, will they grow in a similar place? This might be the doubt you will be getting. You should understand that I am saying, ideally speaking, rice and wheat will grow in delta regions because it is naturally conducive for those crops. But it doesn't mean it will not grow elsewhere. It is just that the cost of producing it will be much higher. If you create the necessary condition, the necessary waterlogging conditions, temperature is anywhere there in the same latitude. If you give them the necessary irrigation facilities through tank, canal or borewell irrigation, you can produce these cereals provided other constraints are taken care. Similarly, pulses were traditionally grown in semi-arid and slightly cooler but drier regions. Okay, and the soil where they grow, you have to understand that pulses are leguminous. These crops require a soil which require aeration. Like the roots need some breathing space. Also, it means that water will drain easily. The surface level moisture requirement is slightly lesser when compared to the cereals. Okay. So, if you create the conditions required for maize, maize will also grow in that region. This logic you should not forget. Why is the crop diversification now happening? Because it is economically more viable, because the government is procuring it for ethanol blending. Why are we carrying out ethanol blending? To reduce our pollution within our petrol. That is the primary objective. The secondary objective is to reduce the current account deficit. These are the two reasons given by our government for ethanol blending: pollution as well as current account deficit. Clear? Moving on. So I spoke about majorly rice, wheat and maize. Are there any other crops which are sources of carbohydrates? Yes, but we will take that aspect in some other class, which will be beyond the scope of this class. Now, getting back to the agenda of economic survey, we will see what is highlighted by the economic survey. We were talking about the aspect of yield. What is yield? Given 1 acre, let's say same amount of inputs are given to a farmer, you produce like X number of kgs, like 1 quintal of a product. If the same inputs are given to some other who has better understanding of the crop science, they will produce X plus 20% more quintals. The yield of the second case is said to be higher. Okay. Even though the area available for cultivation in our country is very high, because of the lack of investments into agriculture, especially with respect to this traditional crops like rice and wheat, we still have very minimal increase in output, the yield aspect, when compared to global giants like China. There is one crop where we are the leading producer, that is groundnut. So it becomes our imperative to understand what created this. Why did this happen? What are the major states that facilitated groundnut's status now? Let's try to understand. What type of a crop is groundnut? It's an oil seed. It is both a source of a protein as well as fat. Let's go back to our macros here. This protein and fat, which will compensate for a complete absence of diet in the previous days, like people did not have access to this proper nutritious meal. Groundnut is one cheap source. However, it also has fats which has a lot of calories. You should understand the implication of consuming it more than required. Now, groundnuts are produced because geography favored us. The reason why we are not able to achieve the same scale in cereals like rice and wheat is because we don't have investments in agriculture. Rice and wheat by nature are something that requires a lot of investment. That is the contrast. Now, what is the survey saying? Let's say, for example, if I create a question and if I lay down a trap saying that India has the highest per hectare yield in cereals and pulses, it is false. Why? Because we are not investing in agriculture. Next up, I was talking about groundnut. In this context, let me take you to the economic logic of oil seeds. If we have to create that economic security for farmers and at the same time nutritional security for our citizens, there is one component which is causing a pain point: edible oils. 50% of our edible oil needs is met through imports, primarily from Indonesia and other tropical nations where you will find palm oil. All the street food that you see around you, which has the not so healthy food, you will find palm oil, which is easier to produce. Palm oil in many tropical nations, like say the equatorial nations like let's say Indonesia, those areas saw a huge damage to their environment because they were cultivating this like a crop. Monocropping was happening. Imagine one pest literally destroying that crop, entire region's biodiversity gets destroyed. So even though when we know we have the same kind of a climate, our policy choices stopped us from investing in this because of the same reason. And traditionally, the oil seeds that we had were different than palm. Palm oil is not something that was natural to us. If you go to the various parts of our country, the traditional oil that we used to consume is definitely not palm. Go to the eastern part. What kind of oil do you see there? Mustard oil. If you come to the southern part, you will see coconut, groundnut. Go to the western part, you will see till, you will see mustard. A combination of there. In Gujarat region, you will see also groundnut, because Gujarat is the largest producer of groundnut. So in a single shot, you are getting access to both the protein source as well as the fat source. And this is a problem to the country, because 50% dependence on outside is not only an economic risk but also a global value chain risk. If you are not getting access to palm oil because of some geopolitical tension, the prices in our country will skyrocket. And government doesn't want making bare minimum aspects of food unaffordable. So it's a national imperative that we have to become Atmanirbhar even in oilseeds. It is in this context our survey highlights the good areas where the national mission for oil palm, you can find it there. Oil producing regions. Government highlights Northeast as well as the Andaman and Nicobar Islands as the good places for this oil palm, like palm oil plantations. Okay. And if you take a look at the regions which have pulses dominance, it is Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. Madhya Pradesh is also one of the largest producer for another oil seed. It's not an oil seed exactly, it's a beans. It's a leguminous plant, soya. So this peculiar nature of soya, which is unlike other leguminous crops, it is both a source of protein as well as oil. The secondary use of this is, it is also used as a feedstock in poultry industry. Okay. Soybean farmers are protesting against government's decision to with US, like government's decision to open up the market for US. There has been a point of contention whether we should allow US to mingle with our soybean trade. Like the government at that helm of affairs now, they are very skeptical, because price predictability is very important for these crops. If the market crashes, it will lead to entire loss for the farmers, and they are not in a position to absorb this kind of losses. Either they have to export it elsewhere or internally sell it to the market. So these are some of the issues. Okay. The secondary use of soybean is in some specific niche areas. It is now seen as an alternative to meat. The concept of lab grown meat is becoming more and more acceptable, because there is a small segment of the population which believe that they have to move away from animal based products towards soy based products, so that the global footprint, because of the animal husbandry industry, the meat industry, comes down. Even in those sectors, formalizing the soybean sector can actually generate a lot of revenue. If you see the entire belt here, and also in Southeast Asian nations, soy as a product is very valuable. If you take a look at, let's say, Indonesia, there is a small dish or small product called tempeh, which is fermented soya. This market is also growing. But to facilitate and compete with market leaders like Indonesia, where they have both export as well as domestic markets, you will need the support of the government and formalize that sector. This is one area that you need to know. This is what the survey says. So we were discussing groundnut as a area. Now if you take a look at the areas where groundnut grows, majorly you will find it in Gujarat region. Gujarat nearly has 40 to 50% of the groundnut production. The quality of the groundnut in Gujarat, which has more fat percentage, more fiber, and they're long grained. usually you will find this snacks like Haldirams, etc., where you have these peanuts, right? They will be produced from Gujarat region only. The Gujarat and Maharashtra peanuts, which are known for their different shape and more crunch is there in that. This industry is also supposed to grow. In many European markets, let's say for example, a global giant like Haldiram, which is born and that it grew in India, this is one major export product. In some markets where the incidence of peanut allergy is very high, except in those markets, rest of the areas, Gujarat groundnut is a very, very important source of revenue for the farmers there. We need to formalize this export promotion councils to, there are something called export promotion councils. These are the places where you will try to find and discover new markets and position our sellers with the buyers in those regions. Okay. As far as agriculture products and marine products are concerned, you have two major bodies called, any idea? APEDA and EMPEDA. So you will have to know about these organizations as well. We will get back to this some other day, but just mentioning it here so that it falls into place. Now, one more thing. Is groundnut a kharif crop or a rabi crop? It is available in both the seasons. It is a crop that can be grown throughout the year. When you're looking at groundnut in the rabi season, you have to artificially create that moisture conditions, and this is possible in the southern part. So whenever you are looking at Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, this is a time period after your Pongal. Usually after the harvest is done, like it is during this season, you will see groundnut production artificially through canal irrigation. All right. So if you see a combination where groundnut is positioned in a frost prone region, you can eliminate that. If you are seeing any groundnut in a alluvial soil where clay is very high, waterlogging conditions are there, the roots will rot and the crop will not survive. You can eliminate that option as well. If you are seeing that in a evergreen belt, the aeration zone of that soil is very poor and the crop will not survive even there. Whenever UPSC creates these kind of pairs, eliminate them. Okay? Now, this is the summary of whatever we were discussing. Now, let's say, I give you a statement. With new technology, West Bengal has become the major producer of gram and lentils. What do you have to say? With new technology, West Bengal became a major producer of lentil and gram. True or false? Why? I will expose two traps here. The answer is, of course, it is false, but the reasoning is insufficient in this case. I'll tell you why. Just because you will find alluvial soil in this region, just because you know the fact that rice and jute are available here, it doesn't mean no part of West Bengal will produce lentil. You will still have those areas which are having pulse production, minor quantity. At least for the domestic consumption, every state will have small pockets of this pulse production. So don't create that absolute, frameworks where you are eliminating all the statements. This is one thing that you have to remember. Now, I'll ask you a question. These allied sectors are there. What do you mean by allied sectors in agriculture? What all will come under allied sectors? Yes, animal husbandry, horticulture, sericulture, fish, all of this. If you have to notice the trend or you have to guess the trend, do you think crops will contribute more or animal husbandry or the allied sector? Why? I have given the fact that we have low yield already. So we have almost hit the upper threshold for improving the productivity at this point. We are using maximum area for these crops only. And yet the outcome out of that is very minimal. Despite this, why are we still doing it? Because of MSP. But look at the other side of the coin. Allied sector, your fishery, animal husbandry, sericulture, horticulture, high value crops. The potential here is very, very, very high. But what is required here? Infrastructure investment. You need to create, cold storages. You need to give them more feed. These are the problems, right? So if you take a look at comparison, firstly, if you're looking at the stats given by economic survey, we have hit a highest decadal growth rate in agriculture from in the entire history. Like we have seen the highest possible growth rate. Within agriculture, 30% of the gross value added is coming from these allied sectors. Amongst that, you will see fisheries and livestock contributing more. Crop sector has stagnated. So the order is very important. You should know fisheries first, livestock second, and then crop sector. Why fisheries? There is a renewed emphasis on so-called blue economy. Within blue economy, fish is not the only thing. There are many other things. Using ocean as a resource, within that, one component is fisheries or marine products. Remember that. Why is there an increasing propensity from farmers to, adapt this? What does survey say? There are two major reasons given. First is the safety net. When there is a crop failure, you move away from this and focus on dairy. That will act as an insurance. Like poultry industry or milk industry will act as an insurance in the event of a crop failure. That is one reason. Secondly, if you are looking at the nature of consumption, economic survey also says that rural consumption is increasing. Usually across the world, if you see the tendency of how our consumption patterns are dictated, you will see that as money increases, the consumption on food component increases majorly in protein sources, namely milk and meat. This is the global trend generally. When incomes increase, milk and meat are increasing. So there is a renewed demand when economy grows, especially in the rural sector. That is one more reason. The reason for why poultry and animal husbandry sector is increasing. Second is, obviously there is a base effect. When you compare the milk revolution or the green revolution, the milk and the meat revolution is relatively new. Even when you speak about the success of the schemes like Amul, the success story of Amul, it is majorly seen as an insurance against drought, milk production. In the recent days only, milk as a mainstream activity is increased because cooperative movement took a major growth trajectory because of state government's intervention. That is one more reason. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that this sector does not have any problem. So you need to identify these issues, because these issues will give you a clarity on how you can eliminate the statements. Firstly, livestock. When you're talking about high demand for dairy, this is an opportunity for our livestock industry, but there is also a friction. What is that friction? 60 to 70% of the production cost will actually be taken away by this rising prices in geopolitical tensions and prices of the feed. Whether it is maize or whether it is soybean, that is the major friction. Second one, when you're talking about fisheries sector, prawns, shrimp, these are the major export products. But in some territories like EU, for example, the phytosanitary measures or the non-tariff barriers, the threshold is very high, which will increase the cost of certification and export competitiveness. That is one more thing. Finally, if you are talking about the overall strategy of diversification within the marine sector, access to credit is a very big problem. You don't see banks, especially the regional rural banks, explicitly giving credit to, let's say, a fish like a prawn farmer or a fish farmer. Like, the tendency is rich farmers in specific belts, let's say Godavari districts of Andhra Pradesh or Nellore, they are bringing in their own capital, they are taking the risk rather than banks supporting them. So there is a asymmetry in access to capital, and it is skewed towards rich farmers, which is not helping the sector to scale. Even after that, there is no insurance available. In the event of one crop failure, you can go bankrupt. Imagine back-to-back failures for, let's say, a prawn pond or like shrimp pond or a fish pond. The cost will be nothing less than 15 to 25 lakhs, depending on the size of the pond. Imagine 3 back-to-back failures for a farmer. No matter how rich they are, they wouldn't be coming back. And the initial cost is also high, the care required is very high. And after that, they will have to put in a lot of pesticides into that, which will again, after production, after healthy growth of this, spawn, like, it gets rejected straight away by EU and these markets. The other markets like, let's say, Thailand, they get much more preference. Philippines, Thailand, and also some European nations. Nevertheless, Nellore, this region, they are still known as the shrimp capital of the world, and we are producing one of the finest qualities of shrimp, but the cost is very high. Anyway, next, we have to know some basics about sericulture, which is silk production. Okay. If I have to go on about the silk, I will today stop at the various varieties of silk, India's position in these respective categories, and what problems you have to face. We will be again covering this in the next lecture because time is up. Broadly speaking, sericulture is about silk. And what are the various varieties? You will see these: mulberry, eri, muga, and tussar. These are the 4 major categories where mulberry is the major. If you are looking at this word eri, it also refers to something else. Can you tell me what it is? It's a water harvesting mechanism or a structure in Tamil Nadu in ancient times. Even today it is relevant. Same name, different context. Okay. If you have to remember some important facts, I was talking about Ministry of Commerce, which is responsible for trade in some commodities. Under Ministry of Commerce oversight, you have crops like rubber, coffee, tea, having respective boards for improving the trade in those respective commodities. In contrast to that, the major mistake that a lot of aspirants do is believing that silk board is also under Ministry of Commerce. It is actually under Ministry of Textiles. Okay. This facts we will stop here. Rest of the things we will come back again and discuss from where we start. Okay, see you again on Saturday. That's it for now.